Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're learning Masechtas Makkos, the very beginning of this Masechta. We're starting a new Masechta. We just finished Zvachim, now we're learning Menachos. Zvachim was 120 blot. This was a little bit shorter, 110. Let's go. Kol ha-menachos shenikmatzu shlosh man ksheros ela shlo ola bal m'shem chayva. Very similar to the way that Zvachim begins. It talks about the carbon mincha, the flour offering. However, it wasn't done the way you were supposed to. It was done shelo l'shma. So in this Rashi says, K'gayin shiz nadiv minchas marcheshes v'havia v'kamsa ha'kayin v'omer hareini kaimetz l'shem machvas. So there's two basic types of pans. One is, as we say on Hashemer Shabbats, Habenim Babas, Hakel Yerotzu, K'mincha al machvas, on a machvas. On means it's on the top. It's a thin pan, as opposed to bi marcheshes, which is a deep pan. So obviously the preparation of the flour offering is going to be different. So if your intention was that was supposed to be in a machvas was a marcheshes, so that's considered to be shelo l'shma. So we say it is kosher, even though you did the kamitza or the haktayra, the burning of the flour and the mizbeach, shelo l'shma, el shelo bal m'shem chayvu. We said you can continue to do the rest of the avodah and you can bring it on the mizbeach. However, you don't get the credit as bringing it. Says Rashi, do yotza yedei nidra v'sachel havi acheres l'shem marcheshas. You have to bring another one. And again, this is almost identical to the language of Zvachim when it comes to karbanos. And then it says, Chutz minchas chayte minchas kanais. Now, minchas chayte makes a lot of sense, because as Rashi says, Kegoyin hahi de metama mikdash, and in that situation, there's a chiyuv of carbon oil v'yared, depending on one's financial status. And minchas kanais, we know, is the minchas saita. So if it was done shelo l'shma, that you had the wrong intention for these things, and minchas kanais also falls under this category. But we already know, as we saw again at the beginning of Masechtas Zvachim, that when it comes to a carbon chatos, that's the exception, that it's just posel. Now, there's other opinions over there, but that's the opinion of the Tanakama. And then the Mishnah says, minchas chayte and minchas kanais. If, let's say, again, we're dealing with the mincha offering of a sin offering, again, for example, someone was matami mikdash, there was a chiv of olive yared, which again, if you're poor, you can bring a mincha offering. She comes on shelo l'shma, that you didn't do the kamitza l'shma, which is a scooping up, which is comparable to with a behemoth shchita, or nasan b'kli, that was put into a kli shelo l'shma, which is like kabbalah sadam, the halach, which is obviously the same thing as bringing the blood to the mizbeach. Here it's flour. The hikdir shelo l'shma is comparable to the zrika sadam. O l'shman or shelo l'shman or shelo l'shman l'shman psulos. Namely, even if, let's say, some of it was l'shma, but part of it was shelo l'shma, it doesn't make any difference. Even if you started off with shma and ended off with shelo l'shma, it's possible. Keitzad l'shma shelo l'shman. So l'shem minchas chayte u l'shem minchas nadava. It means that your intention was for the sake of a minchas chayte and for the sake of a minchas nadava. Shelo l'shman l'shman l'shem minchas nadava l'shem minchas chayte. Look at Rashi. Delo teima, don't think l'shmo shelo l'shmo hu depot psula, that maybe it's only when the second thing you did was shelo l'shma. Let's say again you have these two machshavos regarding an avoda, the tafas lashon achron, you go after the second of shelo l'shmo l'shmoi. Let's say the first one was not proper, but the second was good. Loi kamashman the af betchilas devarev adam nitvas islan, right? Or you can look in the different gears on the side. Daf b'gemar v'koshim b'tchilas dibura. Doesn't make any difference if it's the beginning or the end. Either way, for shelo l'shman, if we're dealing with a chatas apostles. So the Gemara asks the question, Lam misna ella. Why does it have to say the word when it says it's kosher ella shlo? Listening v'lo balam l'shem chayva. What's the extra word in there? So hakamashmon l'balam hu d'lo l'shem chayva. It's just telling you that it doesn't work for the Baal because the Baal has to bring another mincha. Ha mincha gufa kshera. However, the carbon itself is a kosher carbon. V'asel shnuye, and you cannot do any other avoda afterwards in the improper or incorrect manner. So even though you messed up at the beginning, you can't just continue to mess up, which is mamish the same thing we said about in Zvachim. Kedrava, Yom Rava, Oyla sheshachta shel shema. If already you did the carbon oil, but you did it shel shema, in which it's kosher, it's just it's an oil shem chayva. So also lizoik double shel shema. You can say, all right, I already fell. I'm going to continue to do bad. Now, why not? It's already it's a problem anyway. So Eboy same as far, Eboy same as Kro. Eboy same as far, Mishum and Mishani ba kol hani lishne lishani ba v'nezel. Just because you made a mistake once doesn't mean you should continue to make a mistake, right? So you could always do better. So just the fact that you did one part Shul Shema, so what? So now it's over? No, now improve yourself. Okay? V'Eboy sema, or you can say it's based on a pasuk. V'Eboy sema kra. What is the pasuk? The pasuk says, "Moitzes sevosacha tishmor v'yasisa kasher nidarta l'Hashem elkecha." So it says nedava. Now we know there's a difference between a nedava and a neder. It's brought down in Masechtas Megillah and in the Ein Bains that a neder is when you say, like neder's 3 letters, you said a lie. It's on me. So therefore, if it's on me, if you lose that animal, you're chai b'achrayis, you have to replace it. A nedava is 4 letters. It's not equivalent to the statement, so it's zu. And therefore it's only this animal. If it gets lost, so not chai b'achrayis. So they have these different halachas. So the Gemara asks, nedava nederhu. So understand why, if we would look at the pasuk in its entirety, in this stuff doesn't have the all the entirety of the psukim, unfortunately, like my other Gemara did. So anyway, karli neder karli nedava. So ella im kamasha nedarta sisi hey neder. You made a neder, so if you did it properly, so you fulfilled your obligation to bring a neder. But if you had the wrong intention and it was shlo l'shma, namely it wasn't for the sake of a neder, but it's for the sake of a nedava, so let it be a nedava, right? Again, it doesn't mean that's oil l'shem chayva, but the fact that it changes the language in psukim, therefore it tells you that you can still now bring it as a nedava. The nedava mishar l'shnuiba. Understand, how can you change? How can you deviate? As Rashi says, "Vaksiv im zevach shlamim karbanoi." If you're going to be makar b'karban shlamim, shtezvicha l'shem shlamim. That it has to be for that sake. So masnisan the look Rav Shimon, the sound Rav Shimon Aimer kol menachos shenikmusul shlo shman ksheros v'olabalam l'shem chayva. So this is a pretty interesting shita of the shita of Rav Shimon. He actually says that when it comes to kamitza, unlike the dinim of a carbon, that even though it was shlo l'shma, it is l'bal shem chayva. Shein ha'menachos doimos l'zvachim. You can't compare a mincha to a zevach. Why not? Shakoimitz machvas l'shum marcheshes. Again, let's say your machshava is it's supposed to be al machvas, on a thin pan, but your intention was bimarcheshes, in a thick, big pan. So these are 2 totally different outcomes. They'll end up being cooked, baked completely different. So the reality is he's actually showing that he's lying, because it's going to be clear that it was really l'shem machlas. We don't care what he says. We can look at his actions, and you can see, based on the frying pan, the pan that he's using, you'll know whether in fact it's a machmas or marcheshes. For the same matter, chariv l'shum belula. Let's say he had a mincha which was supposed to be one which is dry, like for example, like minchas kanais is an example. There's no levina, there's no frankincense, there's no oil. He said, l'shum melula, it's going to be belula b'shemen. So you'll see that it's dry. You can see that there's no oil in it. So l'shum chariva, l'shum chariva. Okay, so now that he holds by a mincha, it does work because it's clear what the actions are, and it speaks more than your wrong machshava, a faulty thought process. Is less than the metzias. So it's a very interesting svara that's when it comes to a mincha, that you could see that. Well, how about when it comes to karbanos? Of a bezvachim enukin, shchita chasukun, zrika chasukun, kabbalah chasukun. Why is it in that order? But the point is that if you do shchita to an animal, you don't know. Okay, obviously a zachar and a keva, right, and an oila, it has to be a zachar. Okay, but the metzias is when it comes to certain animals, you don't know necessarily what carbon it is. So it's more of a reason to say it's not going to be oila shem choiva because your maseh is not moichiach. Over here, since your maseh is machiach, then l'chayr we should be able to make a distinction, which is interesting. Which again is not what our Mishnah says. Our Mishnah is not like Rav Shimon. That's how he said in the first line. Masnisa lo Rav Shimon, because Rav Shimon taka holds that when it comes to a mincha is oil shem chayva. Okay, let's slow down and look at question 1. Oil sheshachta shlo l'shma, also lizrak dama shlo l'shma manon. So, as we said, one is svara, like why would you continue to make this mistake? Or the psukim, it says Moises v'dach tishim rabasisa kashin nidarta, and then it says nadava. So karli neder v'karli nadava, shem enu oil neder nadava miyahu v'asul l'shanas min nadava. Okay, so again, you can continue to bring. All right, so that's pretty clean, and let's okay, so that's that. So again, one svara of Rav Shimon, as we said, is maseh moichiach. Okay, you should be able to again pretty cleanly see that when it comes to these karbonai, when it comes to a carbon mincha, you know what it is. So it should be Ol Shem Chayva even of Sholshma. So Hanichlo Rabbi Ashi Diermer Kan Bekaimitz Machvas Shomar Cheshes Kan Bekaimitz Minchas Machvas Shom Minchas Mar Cheshes. So we can say that there's a difference over here. Let's take this slow. So according to Rabbi Ashi, who is going to answer later on, that he's going to say, how do you understand this opinion? So look at Rashi. The Rav Shimon Olu El Ba'oimer Hareni Kaimitz Machvas L'Shem Marcheshes. If a person says, I'm going to do Kamita of a Machvas for the sake of a Marcheshes, Kivan Deloy Idker Shema de Mincha. He didn't mention the word Mincha, El Shema de Mana. All he did was mention the Keli. So Dibri Ruach Ba'almaninhu, he's just speaking air, right? Therefore it's Ol Shem Chayva. But when he's not Ol Shem Chayva is when he does mention the name of Mincha. So Ikal Ukma Masnisin Rav Shimon. So maybe our Mishnah Taka is like Rav Shimon. Masnisin Mincha L'Shum Minchahi. Right? So according to the Shita of Rav Ashi, that's how one answer we could Taka say. Right? We could say that Lefi Shitas Rav Ashi, that the distinction is whether we're talking about whether you said mincha or not. Okay, I was wondering, this is going to be a long question. Question TB14. Shimon Omer Kol Hamanach Hashikus Shmuel Ksheris v'Olav Shem Chayba. My time Rav Shimon so Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi, essentially I wrote this right. It's a hard test. Rav Ashi says who Omer b'minchas marcheshes, and then lo olu l'shem chayva. Okay, so that's the shita of Rav Ashi, and a lot of this stuff is going to be continuing on to Dav Gimel, but at least want to get this down here. Okay, this is TB14. So let me just mark this down here. So this is the idea of Rav Ashi. So Anicha Rav Ashi, so he makes that distinction of kan b'koyimitz machos l'shem marcheshes kan b'koyimitz minchas marcheshes l'shem minchas marcheshes. Okay, so masnisin mincha l'shem minchahi elo rabba v'rabba ma'ikume mar. Again, we're supposed to know who Rabba and Rabba are, but it's going to be mentioned eventually, so we'll get to it. Okay. L'chi tema k'dekam shani Rabba kan b'shinui kodesh kan b'shinui bailim. So maybe he'll make the difference between shinui kodesh and shinui bailim. So what is that? So let's break this down. And hamas nisin shinui kodeshu. So if we're dealing with the carbon itself, right? So then you can see the difference, right? That has to do with Shinoi Kodesh. So then our Mishnah says it's not Oil Shem Choiva. But by Shinoi Baalim, in that situation, so then it will be Oil Shem Choiva. Okay, so let's look in Rashi. The Chitema Masnisin, Masuk Makram Shimon, later on, can be Shinoi Kodesh, it can be Shinoi Baalim. So again, if it's Shinoi Kodesh, you can tell the difference, but Shinoi Baalim not. So Hadiyam Rav Shimon Olu B'Shin. Hadiyam, actually let's look in Rashi. Hadiyam Rav Shimon Olu B'Shinoi Kodesh. Kigain Minchas Machvas L'Shem Minchas Marcheshes. Right? Why? Because again, Demaseha Meichichin Shehu Machazim. It's clear you're lying, right? So maybe in that situation, so it will be Olu Shem Choiva. What is that? Kegoin Shavia Ruvain, that Ruvain brings this. It comes to Kayin L'Shem Shimon, but he does it for the wrong person. Deleka Mas Machiach, either Ruvain here, Shimon, right? It's hard to know the difference between it was him, it was for Ruvain, or it was for Shimon, okay? So that could be a distinction, right? So one is, let's just write this down. Kan b'shinoi bailim. Let's do with kodesh, and then kan kodesh. I'll write olu, and I wrote v'kan b'shinoi bailim, right? Ruvain v'lo Shimoin lo olu. Okay. All right. So maybe that. So and therefore diktani ketel lishmon sholosh shmon. So we can say, how do we understand this case of lishmon and sholosh shmon? So he said, L'shum minchas chayta, l'shum minchas nadava. The problem is, how could our Mishnah be talking about Shinui Kodesh, that by Shinui Kodesh, that attacker could be Oil L'Shem Baalim? First of all, the Mishnah doesn't say that. It says Shalol L'Shem Baalim, which is Shtikal Mana. But the other question is, the Mishnah clearly is talking about Shinui Kodesh. It's not talking about Shinui, it's talking about Shinui Kodesh. Okay. Ve'inami could come a shani rava, kan b'kaimitz mincha, l'shum mincha, kan b'kaimitz mincha, l'shum zevach. So maybe it's this other pshat, that you did kamitzas mincha for a mincha. So it's a mincha to a mincha, as opposed to a kamitzas mincha for a zevach, which is a totally separate thing. And maybe we should say, when it comes to a mincha, everything is the same. Look at Rashi. The hadiyam olu b'koimitz minchas machmas hashim minchas marchashos mishum dachsiv zois taras mincha. These are all the minchas tar achas ulchol menachos, right? They're the same. So therefore, it should be olu shem choiva because it's the same. B'haditani lo olu b'koimitz mincha l'shem zevach. L'kaman payrech b'koimitz l'shem zevach. With skasher nami deha masem ochichen. So we can say, what do you mean? Is that also masem ochiach? Obviously, it's not for a carbon. If it's, you can see it's flour. It's not a behemoth, right? So that's gonna be a kasha, right? Let's see, I wrote Hapasik Mamayit Menachos Dafka Zvachin. I'm not sure what I wrote. Zed Davar Nicker Mahu Isa Yosem Adibor. Like drawing at straws over here. It's not that it's wrong, but it doesn't really. It's not clean. The answer. So it could be Kaimitz. So your Kaimitz Mincha L'Shem Mincha. Oh, L'Shem Zevach. Right? So it'll be Olu. And this is Lo Olu. Okay. All right. So that's another possibility. Kam comes to Mincha L'Shem Zevach. So how much this in Mincha L'Shem Mincha he the tiny L'Shem Minchas the double L'Shem Minchas Chayte. So you can't give the schiluk. El Rabba Rabba Mechvirta Mastis and Rav Shimon. They have to say our mission is not like Rav Shimon. Okay. For Rav Shimon or Rav Shimon, the Sanya. We have a steer. Rav Shimon Aimer Kodesh Kadashim he Kachatas Ukasham. We say that it's like a chatas, it's like an asham. What does that mean? Yesh behen kachatas, yesh behen ka'asham. In certain regards, there's certain mincha offerings that are like a chatas, and there's certain mincha offerings that have the same din as a carbon asham. Minchas chayti harihi kachatas, which means that it's just like a chatas. Shelo lishma is puzzle. Lefika kamsu shelo lishma psula kachatas. Minchas nadava harihi ka'asham. Lefika kamsu shelo lishma kshera. So it's kosher. However, here's the key: the ka'ashim, ma'ashim kosher, ve'ena maratza av minchas nedavik sher ve'ena maratza. It's not maratza, right? So we know clearly that that's not the case, right? Rav Shimon holds that Rav Shimon just said that it is maratza. It's oil l'shem choiva. So Amar Rabba lokasha kan b'shinui kodesh kan b'shinui bailim. So this is again the sheet of Rabba. Rabba says there's a distinction between shinui kodesh and Shinui Bailim. When it's talking about Shinui Kodesh, so again you make a difference between a Machmas and a Marcheshes, so Masem Chiach, and therefore it's Ol Shem Choiva. However, in the event where it was Shinui Bailim, so then it's not going to be, right? Which is also, I thought Rabashi said, okay, Amwe Baya Michti, Machshava de Pasal Rachmana Hakeshihi. Mali Shini Kaddish, Mali Shini Bailam. Understand? What's the difference? What's the difference? The pasuk says it's not good, so therefore it shouldn't. Even when it comes to Shinui Kaddish, it should also not be all Shem Bailam. So I'm like, yeah, that's true, but Masamay Chichin. There is a clear delineation between a machvas and a marcheshes. So therefore, even though you had a shlosh ma machshava, it would still be ol shem chayva because it's moichiach that you were just lying. Rav Shimon Svarhi, Rav Shimon darish time to kra. Machshava dolo minkar pasol achmana. A machshava that's not so very clear, that will passel. Machshava de minkar lo pasol rachmana. However, a machshava which is clear, like a mincha, will not passel. Simon oila molak umitza chatas oiv kachim kadoshim kachim kalim. Okay, so let's look at this shita mekubetzas on the side. Machshava de minkara lo pasor achmana. So what is something which is obvious? Like for example, so it says kagayin shinei kaidish. Shim kamatz minchas nadavol shem minchas chayte har machashavta nikeres. It's clear mitoich maaseha de minchas chayte. We know Minchas Chayte does not require these things. There's no oil, there's no frankincense. For who noisin b'Hashem levayna, you did put it in. So obviously it's not a Minchas Chayte. V'achinami Minchas Machvas l'shem Minchas Marcheshes. Nikeres Machashavto. It's clear what your machshava is based on the pan that you're using. Hilkach lo pasor achmana el machshava de lo minkara. Except for something which is not so clear. You don't know if this will look like you're lying or not. You're going shinui balam shehevi chatas ruven l'shem shimon. The kimu kuli alma imachazim hu pasur achmana. So in that situation, it does passel. So l'chayro, what we're saying at this point, it almost sounds also not like the sheet of our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says a chatas passels, but we're saying maybe not when it comes to a mincha, because it's minkara milsa, that it's a chatas a minchas chatos as a minchas nadava. Okay. Fine. El miata oilas oiv shomolko malo mishum chatas oiv. Now we know like this. We know that there's a din. We actually just saw this at the end of Zvachim, that at least when it comes to the Bama Gedoyla or in the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash, there was a Chutta Sikra. There was this line which is in the middle of the horizontal line in the middle of the Mizbech. When it came to a Chatas, the blood was sprinkled above the Chutta Sikra. The oil was sprinkled below the Chutta Sikra. The oil of, however, is the opposite. The oil of is sprinkled above the Chutta Sikra. The Chatas of is on the bottom. So by your blood applications, everyone should know exactly what you're doing and which type of carbon it is. So it should be minkra milsa there too. Oilas of shamokol malwa, which is what you're supposed to do. But you did mishum chatas oif, which of course the chatas oif would have been sprinkled on the bottom. So tiratza maseh moichichin aleha dosa ofi. So it should work. It should be considered to be a good carbon because it's clear that's an oil sa'of. The fact that you did the sprinkling up top. Again, it's clearly an oil because it was a chatas oif. You would have sprinkled it below the chatas sikra. Otu what? Chatas oif l'malwa mi leisa. You're telling me even though it's true, when it comes to chatas oif, it's true that it's supposed to be on the bottom, but is there also not possibly on the top? Ha'omer mar malika b'chol makam mizbeach kshera. That you could actually have done the malika, which is akin to the shchita of a behema. So when it comes to a carbon, like an oila sa'oif or a chatas of, we do the malika, and that could be done anywhere. So it's possible that that blood could have made it to the top also, even though we're talking about a chatas of. And therefore, because of that, it's not so clear. Okay. Says Rashi Malika b'chatas of b'chol makom mezbech kashera, right? The havi la machshava delo minkra mishum hachi tanan delo also. That's why it would not be oila or shem chayva because it's not minkra milsa. Okay. So in second, there's another distinction in oil sa'oif and the chatas of. Oil sa'oif shemitza dama lamalo shem chatas oif. Let's say you squeeze the blood of the oil sa'oif on the mizbeach. But you do it for the sake of a chatas oif. We also know that's only something which is done with an oil oif. You only do the squeezing of the blood on the mizbeach by an oil oif, right? The chatas oif, if it's a chatas oif, well, mata havile avid ba the law hazah. Clearly, it's an oil oif. Right? As Rashi explains, oil sa'of hekshira b'mitzui. So you need to squeeze the blood out. It says in the pasuk, "V'nimsa dama al kir mizbech chatas sa'of hazot chila." You need to do the sprinkling first by the chatas sa'of. V'yachach mitzui. Okay, it's true. You do a mitzui by a chatas sa'of, but first you have to do the sprinkling of the blood by the chatas of, and only afterwards the mitzui. So you could clearly see that the how things are being done. That's an oil sa'of. So it's still okay. Fine, you did this the malik on the top, but still it should be masamay chiach by an oil sa'of. As we continue to Gimel Manalf, so Amri Dilma mitzui the basar hazahu. Maybe the mitzui will be done after the sprinkling, which is again not what is typically done by an oil sa'of, but maybe that's it. So maybe he already did the hazah already before the mitzui. So and we only see this, right? So you don't know, right? You don't know what's going on over here. So it's possible, yeah, fine. Hazah is done first, but maybe this is the mitzui, and you think that this is referring to a chatas oif. So again, it's not minkra milsa. All right. We'll get to the two dots. Chatas oif, shehiza dam lamata, was shem oil sov teratza. For the same logic, we should say that if you sprinkle the dam of the chatas oif below the chatas sikra, which is what you're supposed to do, it should work. The mas mechichin la the chatas oifhu he the also of he lamalahavi ovid law. You'd have done the sprinkling above. Umitsui who ovid lay, and mitzui you would have done, right? Again, when it comes to the also, if you just do mitzui as opposed to chatos, if you do hazon mitzui. So hakanam, you're right. Tak, you're right. That when it comes to the chatos of that was sprinkled below, that's obvious as mas mochiach that taka the din should be that it's maratza. El, or maybe there's no ella here. Lafish ein hamanachos daimos l'zvachim kaimer l'zvachim lo oifas. When we said that a mincha there's no comparison to a mincha to a zevach, because mincha is maseh mochiach, but a carbon is not mochiach. When it comes to ofos, it's not true. When it comes to ofos, the taka is mochiach, at least when it comes to a chatas of. Okay, stop there. Question 2. Heichem eshkach zalibah the rabba chatas shalol shma the kasher Rav Shimon mishum the maseh mochiach leha umay ha'chacham. So one is, if you put the spring, when it comes to the chatas oif, this is only answered half of this. Chatas oif, that you sprinkle the blood below for the sake of an ois oif, if it's an ois oif, it would have been done above. And also, mitzui v'lo hazah, you do mitzui without doing the sprinkling. When it comes to ois oif, you just do mitzui, the squeezing, and that's it. When it comes to the chatas oif, you do the hazah, then the mitzui. So these are clear distinctions. That's masa mochiach. Let's look at question TA11, possibly. Kol menachos shenikbetzu l'sholosh shman ksher so shelo balam shem chayva. Gemara Michael gam libed Rav Shimon isveili the ol shem chayva Rav Ashi. Hech koi masnisin k'Rav Shimon. So Rav Shimon Ayri ba'omer hareni koimitz machvas l'shem marchashas. Masnisin b'koimitz minchas machvas l'shem minchas marchashas, which is the shita of Rav Ashi, which we actually saw in Beis Mud Beis, but I believe we're going to see it again tomorrow. Adkan.